Chingiz Aitmatov is a very well-known writer and novelist in Turkey, but I have to admit that he has been rather discovered very late because during the Soviet time it was not very easy to have access to cultural events. I think in late 80s, when there was some kind of a beginning of opening of the Soviet culture in Turkey, we began to understand and read about Aitmatov. And today I can safely state that he's one of the most loved and most known novelists, and almost all of his books are translated into Turkish. Immediately after the disintegration of the former Soviet Union, I think Turks and the Central Asian Turkic peoples discovered each other again, and of course that was a very exciting moment for the reunion of all these Turkic peoples. Immediately with the independence of these countries, we started to establish diplomatic relations with all the Central Asian countries, and we have now very extensive relations, particularly with Kazakhstan and also with all the other Central Asian republics. The Turkish businessmen, the Turkish constructors are very active, and there are a lot of construction works going on in Central Asian countries, mostly by the Turkish contractors. That's the reason why Turks and the Central Asian peoples are very close to each other, and this togetherness is developing. And I remember having met him when we were having some deliberations with the Soviet Cinematheque organization. He was, of course, at that time also very popular, not only as a novelist but also as a director and a film producer. So I was a young diplomat, and of course very exciting for me to meet someone like Chingiz Aitmatov, who was very famous. Several years later, I was in Brussels, in Belgium, as a diplomat several years later in my career. And Chingiz Aitmatov was the ambassador of the Soviet Union in Luxembourg and Belgium. And when Kyrgyzstan became independent, he became the ambassador of Kyrgyzstan in Brussels. And as he arrived in Brussels, I was one of the welcomers, and I met him, and I just tried to remind of myself to him, and I said several years ago we were in Moscow, and I was a young Turkish diplomat in Moscow at the Turkish embassy at that time. I'm not sure whether he really recognized and remembered me, but he was so kind to say that he did, and that was of course another joyful moment for me.